At 2:00 a.m., a police SUV pulled up to a quiet residential home in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. No sirens, no flashing lights, just the eerie silence of a pre-dawn morning. Minutes later, 2 bodies lay inside their own home, victims of a calculated attack. And the most terrifying part, this wasn't the only target that night. If you want to follow the complete investigation of this shocking case and discover more chilling true crime stories, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. On the night of June 14, 2025, the state of Minnesota experienced one of the most brazen acts of political violence in its modern history. What began as a series of gunshots in the darkness would soon reveal itself to be part of a meticulously planned assassination campaign targeting some of the state's most prominent political figures. The victims weren't random. The attacks weren't crimes of passion. This was execution by design. Melissa Hortman was 57 years old at the time of her death. She had served as Speaker of the Minnesota House of Representatives from 2019 to 2023, making her one of the most powerful Democratic lawmakers in the state. During her tenure, Hortman championed progressive legislation on education funding, healthcare access, and reproductive rights. She was known for her sharp intellect, her ability to navigate complex political landscapes, and her unwavering commitment to her constituents in District 36A, which covered parts of Brooklyn Park and Fridley. Born and raised in Minnesota, Melissa attended the University of Minnesota Law School and built a career as an attorney before entering politics in 2005. She was a mother, a community advocate, and a fixture at local town halls. Despite her high profile in state politics, Melissa lived without the security details, typically reserved for federal officials. She resided in a modest single-family home in Brooklyn Park with her husband Mark Hortman, who stayed out of the political spotlight and supported his wife's demanding career from behind the scenes. Mark Hortman was 56 years old, a private individual with no public role in politics. Friends and neighbors described the couple as warm, approachable, and deeply involved in their community. They attended local events, supported youth programs, and maintained the kind of low-key lifestyle that seemed far removed from the dangers that would come to claim their lives. There were no bodyguards stationed outside their door, no surveillance cameras monitoring every movement, no reason it seemed to fear that their home would become the site of a targeted killing. Yet in the early hours of June 15, 2025, that sense of safety was shattered. The timeline of that night reveals a chilling sequence of events that unfolded with military precision. Shortly after midnight, on June 15th, Minnesota State Senator John Hoffman and his wife were shot inside their home in Champlin, a city located approximately 10 miles northwest of Minneapolis. Both victims sustained serious injuries, but survived the attack. According to witness statements and initial police reports, the shooter approached their residence under cover of darkness, fired multiple rounds, and fled the scene before law enforcement could respond. The Hoffmans were rushed to a nearby hospital where they underwent emergency surgery. Investigators immediately began canvassing the neighborhood, collecting forensic evidence, and interviewing potential witnesses. At that moment, authorities believed they were dealing with an isolated incident, possibly a home invasion or a targeted attack on Senator Hoffman due to his political work. But within hours, that assumption would be proven tragically wrong. Around 2:00 a.m., approximately 10 miles south in Brooklyn Park, a vehicle resembling a police SUV pulled into the driveway of Melissa and Mark Hortman's home. The vehicle was equipped with emergency lights and markings that closely mimicked those used by law enforcement agencies. The driver, dressed in what appeared to be a police uniform, exited the vehicle and approached the front entrance of the residence. What happened next remains partially reconstructed from forensic evidence neighbor accounts and the subsequent investigation. The individual posing as a police officer gained access to the property. Gunshots were fired at close range inside the home. Melissa Hortman and Mark Hortman were both killed. The shooter did not linger. He returned to the SUV and prepared to leave the scene. It was at this point that actual law enforcement officers responding either to a 911 call or as part of a broader alert following the Hortman shooting arrived at the Hortman residence. What they encountered was not a crime scene being processed, but an active threat. The suspect still at the location opened fire on the approaching officers. A brief but intense exchange of gunfire ensued. The officers returned fire, but the suspect managed to escape on foot, abandoning the SUV in the driveway. Inside the abandoned vehicle, investigators made a discovery that transformed the case from a double homicide into something far more alarming. They found a handwritten list containing approximately 70 names. The list included current and former lawmakers, political activists, community organizers, and public figures, many of whom were affiliated with progressive causes or the Democratic Party. The document appeared to be a target list, a roadmap for a campaign of politically motivated violence that had only just begun. The realization sent shockwaves through the state. This was not a crime of passion. It was not a random act of violence. It was a premeditated plan to assassinate dozens of individuals based on their political beliefs and public roles. Law enforcement agencies at the local, state, and federal levels immediately mobilized to protect the individuals named on the list and to apprehend the suspect before he could strike again. Within hours, the suspect was identified as Vance Luther Boelter, a 57-year-old man from Minnesota. Boelter was not a known figure in extremist circles. He had no prior record of violent crime. He was not on any watch lists. Yet the evidence suggested that he had spent considerable time planning these attacks, acquiring tactical knowledge, obtaining firearms, and preparing disguises to facilitate his access to victims. Investigators began piecing together Boelter's background. He lived a relatively isolated life with few public social media posts and limited engagement with his community. Interviews with acquaintances painted a picture of a man who had become increasingly consumed by extreme political ideology, though the exact nature and evolution of his beliefs remained under investigation. What was clear was that Boelter possessed enough knowledge of law enforcement procedures to convincingly impersonate a police officer, enough planning ability to coordinate multiple attacks in a single night, and enough determination to follow through on a plan that would have resulted in mass casualties had he not been stopped. The manhunt for Vance Luther Boelter became one of the largest in Minnesota history. Hundreds of law enforcement officers from multiple agencies joined the search. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras swept over wooded areas and residential neighborhoods. K-9 units tracked scent trails through parks and along roadways. Roadblocks were established at key intersections. The public was warned to remain vigilant and report any suspicious activity. For days, Boelter evaded capture. Authorities believed he had gone into hiding, possibly in the extensive forested areas surrounding the Twin Cities metro region. Search teams combed through dense underbrush, checked abandoned buildings, and followed up on hundreds of tips called in by concerned citizens. The longer he remained at large, the greater the fear that he might attempt to strike again. On June 15, 2025, approximately 12 hours after the initial attacks, the search came to an end. Law enforcement officers discovered Boelter hiding in a wooded area in the northern suburbs. According to official reports, he emerged from the underbrush and surrendered without resistance. He was taken into custody, read his rights, and transported to a secure facility for processing and interrogation. In the days and weeks that followed, investigators worked to build a comprehensive case against Boelter. They analyzed the forensic evidence collected from the Hortman and Hortman crime scenes, including ballistic reports, DNA samples, and fingerprint analysis. They examined the contents of the abandoned SUV, including the target list, weapons ammunition, and tactical gear. They conducted interviews with witnesses who had seen the vehicle in the area, neighbors who heard gunshots, and individuals whose names appeared on the list. The charging documents filed against Vance Luther Boelter reflected the severity and scope of his alleged crimes. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Melissa and Mark Hortman. He faced additional charges of attempted murder in connection with the attack on Senator John Hortman and his wife. Prosecutors also filed charges related to assaulting law enforcement officers during the exchange of gunfire in Brooklyn Park. Given the nature of the target list and the evidence of premeditation, federal authorities began exploring potential charges related to domestic terrorism and politically motivated violence. If convicted on all counts, Boelter could face life in prison without the possibility of parole. In jurisdictions where applicable, the death penalty could also be considered, though Minnesota itself does not have capital punishment at the state level. Federal charges, however, could open the door to a capital case. The impact of these attacks extended far beyond the immediate victims. The Minnesota State Legislature held moments of silence in honor of Melissa Hortman and in support of Senator Hoffman's recovery. Governor Tim Walz ordered flags to be flown at half-staff and called for unity in the face of political violence. Security protocols for state lawmakers were immediately reviewed and enhanced, with many officials receiving protective details for the first time in their careers. For the individuals whose names appeared on Boelter's list, the psychological toll was immense. Many reported feeling unsafe in their own homes, uncertain whether they would be targeted next, had Boelter not been apprehended. Some temporarily relocated their families. Others increased their personal security measures. The message was clear: political service in America, even at the state level now, carried risks that had previously seemed reserved for national figures. The Hortman family, meanwhile, was left to grapple with an unimaginable loss. Melissa's colleagues remembered her as a tireless advocate for her constituents, a skilled legislator, and a mentor to younger lawmakers. Mark was remembered as a devoted husband and a pillar of his community. Their deaths were not just a tragedy for their loved ones, but a loss for the democratic process itself. As the case moved through the legal system, questions remained. What drove Vance Luther Boelter to commit these acts? How did he compile his target list? Were there others who knew of his plans or provided assistance? Investigators continued their work, determined to uncover the full scope of the conspiracy, if any existed beyond Boelter himself. The judicial process would take months, possibly years, to reach its conclusion. Pre-trial hearings would address issues of evidence admissibility, mental competency, and potential plea agreements. If the case went to trial, a jury would be tasked with weighing the evidence, hearing testimony from survivors and investigators, and ultimately determining Boelter's guilt or innocence on each charge. Only through this process would the full legal accountability be established. Melissa Hortman did not die by accident. She died because she became a target. Her husband Mark died simply for being in the same home, a tragic casualty of violence aimed at silencing a voice in the democratic process. The list found in that abandoned SUV serves as a haunting reminder of what might have been had law enforcement not intervened when they did. 70 names, 70 potential victims, a campaign of terror that was halted just hours after it began. This case stands as a stark reminder that the institutions of democracy are only as strong as the safety afforded to those who serve within them. When political discourse devolves into violence, when disagreement transforms into bloodshed, the very foundations of a free society are threatened. The rule of law demands that those who commit such acts be held accountable through a fair and transparent judicial process, not through vigilante justice or mob mentality. What do you think about this case? Share your thoughts in the comments below based on the facts presented. If you want to stay updated on this investigation and explore more mysterious and chilling true crime cases, subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Justice can only be served when we remain informed, engaged, and committed to the principles that hold our communities together.